All right, guys, I'm pretty informal. I'm just going to put that out there now. So if we hit something that you want to talk about a little bit more, please just let me know. I don't care if I get through all my slides or not. That's not what we're really here about. We're here just to talk about data and how we can do something with it to make our imaging centers, hospitals, systems better. All right, can everybody hear me okay? Yes. All right, outstanding. So who is this guy standing in front of you? Well, my name is John Garrett. I have 21 years in medical imaging service turning wrenches. All right. Now before that, I actually started off in the Navy. I went through their electronics program, which was 2 years and 40 hours a week doing electronics. So then when I got out, I tried to be a salesman. I don't lie well enough to be a salesman. So I ended up trying to fix things, which I'd always done in my life, and chased lithotripters for about 6 months before they realized this guy should probably fix our x-ray. Since then, 21 years, I was turning wrenches, and then I said, hey, I don't want to be the guy at 2 in the morning laying under CT. So I went into management. I got my degree. Let's see, let's see. Oh yeah, multi-vendor, multi-modality. I did everything except MRI, and I even did a little MRI because we had to have a second guy in the room to make sure our first guy didn't get stuck to the MRI with some help. So I mammo, I've done ultrasound, mammo, general x-ray, fluoro, cath labs, you name it, I've probably worked on it. Because my background came from electronics, and electrons seem to flow the same way no matter which equipment. Right, during the age where PACS first came into play before IS owned it, a lot of imaging guys were doing both imaging and PACS administration. I did a lot of that because I have an associates in computer information systems. And so I thought I was going to get out of imaging, become a PACS guy, and I realized they were a dime a dozen and I was awesome, so I had to go be awesome with imaging. I've got my Bachelor of Science in Health and Human Services Management. I got it from the oldest historically black college in the United States. Does anybody know what college that is? It is Wilberforce in Xenia, Ohio. Right? It was, I was in Dayton. It has an excellent, it's just outside of Dayton, Ohio. It has an excellent management program, and it was geared for adults learning who are working full time. So that's where I went. Great college, really enjoyed my experience there. I'm currently the director in clinical engineering at Catholic Health Initiatives. I just moved to the Texas Medical Center, which is in Houston. And I've been there 4 weeks and I'm writing my budget, which is due Wednesday. So I also wanted to point out that I am 7 papers away from my master's in psychology. The goal there is to eventually get a doctorate in psychology before I retire into working with underserved populations such as foster children and veterans. I am a U.S. Navy veteran myself, served in the Gulf War, so I see some people that come back whole. And that's my future goal to rise. I survive that one. Yeah, when I grow up, that's it. So we're here to talk about leveraging data. And we have to answer a few questions before we say how do we leverage this data, because the data we leverage is every bit as important as what we're going to do with it. So what are we collecting? What's actually valuable to us? How are we collecting the data? And how are we accessing or processing the data that we're going to use, right? So I want to talk a little bit about how it's being collected. All right, that's exciting. Okay, let me see if I can fix this again. I'm not sure exactly why this hates me. Come on, no. All right. Otherwise, I'm going to have to just bake this, and you're not going to have anything to watch. And just see the output. All right, guys. Well, you have to forgive me. What's that? No riches to turn? I think what it really is, though, is it may be this very much this wonderful tiny connector. Yep. There we go.
There you go.
Okay. Everything else fails, do a Raytheon reset. Yeah. Don't want to minimize that. It's going to have 5. There we go. All right. So I'm gonna have to actually stand up here and hit buttons. All right. That's why it's not selected. All right, me. Forgive me, I am. There we go. Okay, so let's go forward. There we go. Okay. So your data should be collected in a searchable relational database. Most people that are collecting data are already doing this. There are very few people that don't already have an electronic way to gather the data. So wherever you're storing your service reports, that's going to be your database, is what it comes down to for a clinical engineer. Right? Ideally, it's web-based. There's still some systems out there that are locally based in a hospital on a server. This causes a number of problems if you don't have the proper backups and duplication. It also could be a nightmare if your one server goes down, right? So web-based is always better because it's usually virtualized, and if one of them goes down, it's someone else in the cloud. It should have single-line query. Just don't get hung up on these terms. What it really means is I should be able to say, how many CTs do I have, or how long have I had these CTs? Or I should be able to design these questions and ask them of my database. And then it should give me as accurate information as it can. All right, so let's talk about accessing the data. Large medical systems, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but a lot of medical systems, you only see your section. So if you're in a service industry, maybe you only see your region, right? If you're in a hospital, maybe you only see your hospital, you don't see the outlying hospitals. So you need to make sure you have a keeper of all the data. This means your models have to be standardized. Now, if you're working as a manufacturer or manufacturer's rep, this is no problem because you probably have your model standardized, right? The company's going to tell you what, this model of CT is or this model of X-ray room is. But if you're in-house, I have seen this causes a lot of problems because one person calls it a light speed 16, another person calls it a light speed, and the database thinks they're two different things, right? So you have to make sure that all your models of your equipment are standardized. All of your details are standardized. This is a huge, huge deal. If you're one of these people who's in a region or a single hospital, to do what we want to do and really get valuable data, you're going to want to have someone that you can contact to search the entire database, not just your section, unless you're only reporting on your section. But for some of these decisions, like purchasing decisions and spare parts decisions, things like that, you really want to be able to look at a broader field to make sure that you're looking at what's really happening across your particular group. Okay, your medium to small systems, all I'm really going to say is it's probably going to be the same person that standardizes everything and looks at your entire group. Oh, there we go. So I threw this in here because I talk about unit years a lot when we actually talk about how to calculate some things. And I want to make sure you understand what unit years are. So let's say I have 3 CTs that are the same, and I want to say how many years of data, right? So if you look at if we have 3 CTs, we have one that's 3, one that's 5, one that's 1, we add those up, we have 9 years, right? Pretty simple math. So we have 9 unit years. Now, there's a limitation when you use this data that if all your equipment is relatively new, and you say, hey, I have 100 years of data, but it's 20 units that are only 5 years old, your history on that is going to be a lot different than if you have older equipment involved in your calculations. The reason this is important is this will affect your mean time to failure, which is your average length of time before you see a failure. Does everyone understand that concept? All right? So, and then if you don't understand something I'm going to talk about, please stop me and I'll be happy to explain it in detail. I just don't want to dumb it down to a point where everybody's bored, okay? So, we use this in a number of calculations. Now, you may not want to do years. You might want to do months, minutes, seconds, decades, whatever unit of time you want to do. You just have to make sure that all your calculations use the same amount of time for that calculation, all right? We typically use years in the calculations that we do. All right, so what data is collected? This is really important. In my cartoon that you can't read it, there actually says if I knew you were going to want me to use it, I wouldn't have asked for all this data. Okay, so we're of course going to do the basics. We have to do this anyway for CMS, right? we have to collect what manufacturer, model, data purchase, and the cost of the equipment when we purchase it, right? We need those numbers. Anyway, of course, your models can also have subcategories, and depending on what you're looking for, you may want to use subcategories in your research or you may not. It just depends what you're looking to do. Here's a big one we run into a problem with. Upgrades. So let's say I'm going to use an example that's come across recently for a lot of people who have old CTs that are GE. They stopped supporting the workstations that are inside the CT unit. So if it fails, you have to pay $60,000 if you want to keep using your CT, unless you know the people that I know. So anyway, and if you want to know who those people are, I will tell you later after the stuff I'm asking. But you have to pay $60,000. So let's say you have to pay that $60,000. Well, for other calculations, we have to have a place to put that because for us, that $60,000 is capital dollars. So they don't come out of the clinical engineering department. They don't come out of your operational budget. They came out of capital money, but how do we account for them, right, and cost? What we do is we go back in, make a note in our database that this was upgraded on such and such days for this much money, and then we adjust what we have entered in as its original cost, right? So we can capture the true cost of ownership of this equipment. It's something a lot of people miss, and they go, oh, hey, yeah, this is a great, look, we've had it for 10 years, and it's this price, but it's not that price because there was $60,000 you didn't account for in the cost of that unit. Everybody got that? Understand what I'm saying? All right. So then we go into each service event that you have to record anyway, if you want to be JCO or HVAC certified, and the cost of that event. So here's the other thing that's going to happen. This is really important, and this is where some of this falls apart, is that you really need to make sure they're labeled as either preventive maintenance, repairs, misuse, cannot duplicate, and you want to record downtime. These calculations become much more difficult if you don't actually get your people to record downtime. This takes discipline and entering data. My guys are so sick of hearing me say, have a great weekend and document it, right? Because you've got to have accurate data. If you don't have accurate data, none of this matters. Uh-oh, don't tell me to talk here. Come on, baby. There we go. Okay, so on your labor, everything should be broken down. So you have travel, your parts, your time and labor, your downtime, and your outside service. So because we all know that sometimes we have a system we go in and we do first look on, our guy spends an hour on it, we have to calculate that time out. Then we go and call service in because we can't deal with it. Service comes in, we pay another purchase order for them. We need to capture all of that data and we need to break it out, right? For the calculations we're doing, because we don't want to calculate, yes ma'am.
Let's be supposed to be calculating under the downtime, preventive maintenance, repair, how many patients affected. We
can do that. That's something that would be excellent. If you can, okay.
Because you can, that way you can.
Absolutely.
Later when it says, I need to upgrade my machine, it's gone down in the last 12 months, this many times, this many hours, that's right by hour, not
right.
Day,
right.
And how many patients were affected with schedule through work.
And that's actually a good idea. We just record, because I'm coming from the clinical engineering viewpoint, we have a place I can put downtime. But if you know how many patients you see an hour, it's really easy to calculate that out for another report that would help when you go, hey, we need new equipment. Yes? Mm-hmm.
So when it's down, we've got patients that will also, if the ER was in reverse.
Mm-hmm.
Because if that glucose drugs, if I have a biopsy in the scanner, it's tied up on
Yeah.
And actually, we document, if we go on divert, we actually put a note into our notes field, and the system we use, we can actually search for phrases, but they have to be exact phrases. So our guys have a list of exact phrases like divert, cannot duplicate, which we don't write cannot duplicate, we just put C and D. Because that way we can search it on a search and we can bring them up.
And we're trying to figure what that cost is. So how much
you can get a hold of EMS. Regardless of how big or small the town you live in, get a hold of the EMS director of those houses. They have to track the birds, and they can get you that data. Doesn't matter.
As far as
exposure per patient. And you know when the next 2.8 was coming out of replacement.
Well, I'm going to actually talk about, I'm going to talk about that a little bit more and a little bit later in, as far as like we talk about how many tubes and things like that. We're going to get into some math on that, but you can do it by utilization. The thing is for clinical engineering, and this is purely from the fact that we're already collecting this data in clinical engineering, we can, if we have the other tools, if we have the other information, where we talk to directors, we talk to, you know, other people in the hospital, because I've been in hospitals where everybody's very siloed and we can't get information from each other for whatever reason. I'm trying to break those down. What you'll see is exactly what you're talking about is how many patients do we see an hour, average? How many, you know, or do we only see patients during 8 normal hours or normal working hours? Do we see X number of patients and they drop off? Or do we see patients, 100 patients after midnight because this is a party town and nothing happens till midnight, and then between midnight and 4 we see other patients? There's an infinite number of things you can attach to all of this, but all of this should already exist in your clinical engineering, exactly what I'm talking about, right? So if we take this and we can attach other numbers to it, and I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. So hold on for that one, and if I miss it, call me out and beat me up on it, all right?
It's good. Downtime, manually put in by engineers.
We have to, and here's why.
Okay.
Okay, explain this. In a CT, let's go, we do CT. ERCT is 24/7. We have another CT that runs 10 hours a day, maybe 12. If the ERCT is down for a day, it's down 24 hours, 24 hours downtime. If this one's down for 24 hours, it's down 12 hours of downtime, right? Because we don't want to count the time that you don't actually use it for patients.
Right.
Because otherwise we get false data.
You can't attach an asset schedule within your system.
In our system, we can't, right? So that's why if you don't have people recording your downtime, the best we can do is go back and manually guess at it and kind of have an average. Right.
If your CT scanner goes down, you have to work to that other scanner that typically only works 10 hours a day. If you do some kind of offset, because now you're using that auxiliary scanner 24 hours a day.
We absolutely can. And it just depends on what you're using it for. And this is where it goes into the specific hospitals, and you really have to pay attention to your data to make it valuable, right? Because like you're saying, we're still, in that case, what we typically do is we still say it's down, we're down for at least those 10 hours. Even if you're diverting, you're saying, oh, well, no. But what we do actually, what I do is I actually still count that one down as 24 because it's 24/7, right? Now you're activating. Now if we lose other patients during that period of time, I'm trying to build those relationships so that my director of radiology says, hey, we lost X number of patients because we only have one CT. And I can put that in my notations and calculate it out. It doesn't always happen. And that's where the breakdown is right now because it's not an integrated hospital system.
I'm just trying to quantify in my head, like how we would go back and calculate the mistake if we get hit for whatever reason, like a state piece of equipment down that we can't transfer in.
So what you can do, one of the things you can do is you can say every day is, let's say you have a 12 and a 24 hour. You can say every day is actually 36 hours. And you calculate on a 36-hour clock instead in 24, right? If you understand what I'm saying, every 24 you have 36 hours of usable time, right? So every day is 36 hours. You block your week out and you say, we only had access out of 36 hours a day. Maybe we only had set for those 2 days, we only had 14 hours of access when we did the math out, right? Once you set it up, here's the beauty of it though. If you take the time to set it up, once you've set up and you calculate it that way, we have the numbers we can run. But it's getting those numbers in place in the first place to make sure they're viable. Now I can't do that by myself. I have to talk to you and say, hey, what's your department doing? How many hours? Right. How do you track the hours? And then that way I can make sure that I'm matching what you're doing. And you can go to your clinical engineering department and go, hey, I want this information. Here's how I need it. And they should be able to provide it. And if they can't, you might want to hold on and Joint Commission walks through it. All right, so the value of this data is what we just said is directly related to the validity of the data we're talking about. What is the real numbers? Like you just said, maybe you diverted and you didn't lose a patient. You didn't divert because you had another CT, but maybe you lost patients anyway. But if we can't track that, then we don't have real data. So, and this is where we're going to run into problems, at least on my end. Again, my guys are sick of me hounding them about data. I tell my clinical engineering team, their job is data entry. That's their real job. Now they have to go do something so that they have data to enter. But their job is data entry. Because without it, they didn't actually do anything. right? Because that's what Joint Commission will tell me. They'll say, if it's not in my database, it didn't happen. They'll say, yeah, your guy's too busy to enter his data, then you don't have enough people. Or you need to call an outside service, they can work on something while he enters his data on the equipment that you have. All right. Okay. We invest in training to make sure that, and I do this at least 3 times a year where I sit down and I go over how to do data entry. My guys get sick of hearing about it, but when I call them in for a review and I randomly pull up their work orders, they're pretty well filled out. Because they know, oh, I just the one button again. All right. And you also need to require timely data entry, and this is a huge thing because, and this happened to me the other day, I had a report on an issue where a patient got trapped on a table. And they're like, hey, John, we need to know what you found. And I'm like, I already talked to my engineer, so I knew what we found, but I didn't have a work order. And it's been 72 hours. And I'm like, I don't know what you're doing, but you do nothing else until I have that work order, you know, in front of me. Because if you don't, typically 48 to 72 hours, there's no reason anybody who works on equipment should not have a service ticket available. That's in-house is worse than typically your, anyone who comes in and does service, whether it's a manufacturer or an independent service organization, typically they have it the same day. Get your in-house guys to start to slack because they say, I'm going to go fill it out, and then somebody calls them and says, hey, I have this problem, the switch doesn't work. They say, I'll just take care of that. Oh, yeah, I'm just one other thing. So that's where you have to really make sure that your in-house guys are on it, because I've been an in-house guy and I know how it goes, but I always need time to fill out my paper. Delineate, again, PMs, misuse, and repairs. Misuse, a lot of people have it's touchy in some hospitals. I make sure everyone knows I'm not calling anybody out. If I see a lot of misuse work orders, it's our opportunity to say, hey, can we train so that we can use our equipment more gently, so we can make it last a little longer, maybe we can find a better way to do it. And not just say, we know how to do it and you don't. But it's like, hey, let's find a way that we don't break the equipment while we use it. Right. So, and then, you maybe can't see that in red so much, but it says that the database can only search what is put into it. All right. So that's all of me harping on how to do data. Let's talk about how to process it. Calculating your mean time to failure is pretty straightforward. You take the total number of failures on the unit, and it's just your failures. It's not your misuse. It's not your cannot duplicate. It's not your PMs. And you divide it by your unit years. All right. So if you have, but you have to take all the failures for all your units. And I want to point out, you can break this down a couple of ways. Your department might want to just know, we have 6 different types of CTs. We just want to know for all the CTs, what's our mean time to failure? They might say, we only want to know this one specific type of CT. What's our mean time to failure? You can break this out any way you want. You might even say, we only want to know what the 16 slice CT's mean time to failure is instead of all the CTs or all the 64s or all the 128s or whatever. That's up to whatever you're looking at. All right, so your unit years, I've already gone over that. And then I put in red here, recalculate it for every use, because typically you'll go, hey, here's my mean time to failure, and you won't use it again for a month or two, and it might have changed dramatically in that time frame. You may just had a bunch of downtime.
So you say you don't use that CT for a bunch of years?
No. What I'm saying is, you may not be calculating this number for a report for a month, 3 months, 6 months, and in that time frame, your CT might break down 7 times and change your actual data. So you want to recalculate your mean time to data, your mean time to failure before you use it for other things. What does our mean time to failure tell us? It tells us a couple things. It tells us how often we can expect a failure, of course. Right? So if we have 3 CTs and we figure out that we average 3 months between failures, right? That's 4 failures a year. Right? So we know that, hey, we get 4 failures a year. Great, easy. That's wonderful. But that can also tell us, do we have enough units in our location? We've got, if we've got 2 CTs, is that enough? If we've got 4, is that too many? And this is only based on downtime, right? And should you have spare parts on hand? No one wants to keep stock of parts because parts are expensive. Sitting on the shelf, they're even more expensive. However, there's a couple things we can do. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But there are some places where rural location, they know their CT, they know how many scan seconds their tube fails on their CT. They've only got 1. Right? They know they do X number of scan seconds per year. They replace their CT tube preemptively. They know it's going to be down Saturday afternoon from 3 to 6 to have a CT tube replaced. Why? Because it's cheaper than divert. It's cheaper to divert in planned time. We have plenty of staff that it is to do it at 3 in the morning when it goes down. Right? Other places have 20 CTs. They're not going to worry about preemptive replacement, right? It's all about what happens to reimbursement, let's be honest. Right? Because your CT goes down, you have to divert, your reimbursement just goes right out the door. People cry, scream, gnashing of teeth.
Yeah,
Exactly. So how do we calculate if we've got the right size of equipment? Now, I want to stress this is only based on downtime. There are other factors that will come into this. This is just from the clinical engineering data, what we can contribute to that conversation. All right, this is not an end-all be-all. So this counts the downtime due to failure, not PMs or misuse. How much, you have to know how much revenue you bring in per day or per hour or whatever unit you're using for measurement. I don't know that number. I have to come to you and say, how many patients do you see and what's your reimbursement? Right, so you're going to give me that number. I'm going to figure out your average downtime per failure. So every failure, if we're entering our downtime, we just take all the downtime and divide it by the number of failures. We get our average downtime. Everybody understand that concept? All right? All right, so we take our mean time to failure times our average downtime times the revenue, and that tells us how much a year it's going to cost us in downtime. Right? I'm going to put up here an example that is wrong. I caught this, and I left it in because this is the mistake a lot of people make. So if you have a 3-month mean time to failure, that actually means you have 4 failures per year, not 3. But I did the math with 3. So you have to make sure you convert that to number of failures per year. All right, but let's say we have 4-month mean time to failure, which means we have 3 per year. Your average downtime is one day. Your average income in a day is $10,000. That's $30,000 per unit per year. Everyone understand that math?
Did you say that 3 should have been 4?
It should have been 4 months, yeah. So if it says 4 months, it'd be 3 failures per year.
Okay.
I can if it would make you happy, yes. Nicole, I want you to be happy. Okay, I will do that. So these 3 units, that's it. Okay, yes, ma'am. 3 units would be $90,000 per year in downtime failure. Is that enough to pay for a CD? No. Not unless you've got a really good deal that I'm unaware of. If you've got that deal, please let me know. But the thing is that $90,000 may make or break your department. You might say it's worth having something we could appreciate over, 10 years to bring into our department to make sure that our reimbursement's where it needs to be. Right? This is just downtime for the failures. Okay, this assumes the loss of revenue, and in some places we know that rescheduling happens, and so you may have a modifier to this. You may say we only calculate 80% loss or 70% loss. That's going to be by department, by hospital. Because if you're the only hospital in town, chances are you're not going to actually lose the revenue, but you do have a financial impact during that time. You have to talk about how to calculate that. All right, let's talk about spare parts. Nobody wants to keep spare parts, but depending on your location, if you're in a major city like I am right now, there's no reason for me to keep any spare parts because I get just about anything by courier within 12 hours if I absolutely need. If you're more remote, it might be worth it. But here's the catch on this one. This is specific to a specific type of failure. So I'm going to use tubes as an example because I've been talking about CTs all day. And so we look at when we purchase tubes for CT. So we look at the purchase orders. We say we purchased one this date, the next date that was purchased, and we look at that history, right? So it's real easy. Number of times that part is ordered, time divided by your unit years. That tells you how many you use per year, right? Per unit year. So if you've got 10 of them and you use 1 per year, that means you're using 10 a year. So then you go back to your mean time to failure of that part, times your average downtime, times your revenue. That's your cost free downtime for that part. Now, most parts, it's not gonna matter. It's not gonna be enough to make you store that part. And there's something specific, if you're familiar with CT tubes, is you don't want one sitting on your shelf for any length of time because it'll get gassy and it won't be worth using. But this is where we're going to negotiate with your vendors. You can talk to your vendor and say, I have an issue where I'm blowing through this, let's say a circuit board, specific circuit board, every 6 months. It's just the way the machine works, it happens. It's just our power's bad, whatever the reason is. It doesn't matter why. I have to have that on hand and ready to go when I call, 24/7, 365. Now, whether it's an independent service organization or whether it's one of the major manufacturers, you can probably negotiate them having it on hand. Now, you may have to pay a fee to have it available to you 24/7, 365, or within 12 hours, or within, you know, whatever your time frame is. But you can negotiate that and say, hey, we need to have this part available instantly because we can't store it, we can't afford to store it. But we also, that means you promise to buy it from them. Right? You don't go shopping because it's a Saturday afternoon and you don't need it until Monday. Right? You've got to do good business. You're going to say, hey, you promised to have this on hand. Do you have it? They'll say yes. You say, send it. I'll cut you a purchase order. I'm a firm believer in two sides in the negotiation. Right? It's like, if you're gonna step up and we're gonna make this deal, I'm gonna buy from you if you have it for me. That's just how I do business. So anyway.
John?
Yes.
As a parts vendor, I've been in parts for a while, but, you know, we will, in some companies I've been looking at, keep a tube on a shelf for someone and earmark it for them. Maybe they give us half the price of the tube down or something. We'll keep rotating that thing. It's being fresh, but as long as there's another one back up right away.
Absolutely.
They need it at any second.
And see, that's exactly what I'm talking about is when you'll negotiate whatever that price is. Like, it depends on what it is, how they want to do it, and how you want, what your investment can be. Like you said, they'll keep one on hand. You might have to pay half of it up front, or you might have to pay a holding fee or charge or whatever, and they'll rotate them through and they'll have it. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. It's just a matter of going and talking to them about what your needs are. So guarantee available, as well as the parts cost, you want to make sure that's all figured out. That's going to be based against your cost of downtime when this fails every 6 months, assuming that it does. Make sure you get it in writing. I've talked about this a couple of times. There's a major manufacturer who's not in this room right now, because our good friends from Siemens are here. I've never had this problem with Siemens, to be honest with you. I won't give you their initials, but I call them global evil. So, they move most of their stock to China, right? We needed this happened the other day. Contract, the cheapest place I can possibly get that to, even from independent vendors, is from Global Evil. They have one in the country because they promised to have one in the country. However, I did not have access to the one that was in the country. They met their requirements. They had one in the country, but they shipped one from China to me. 4-day wait. Cath lab's down for 4 days. Right? So make sure you have all of that stuff covered in writing. If you need somebody to negotiate for you, I can consult on that. Because I've been through a lot of these stupid games. All right? Make sure everybody has clear expectations and clear penalties for not having the value of the part. So if I paid you to hold that part and you didn't hold that part for me, there should be some penalty that you have to pay, or that you're responsible for my downtime, for something. Right? Now, most vendors are not going to do that to you. Right? They're going to actually do what they say they're going to do. Yes, ma'am.
Hello, my friend from Siemens. I'm going to put you on the spot. Just because I can. So do you have a contract where you had to pay out that you guys have agreed that you were going to have that tube for me and you covered it up and sent it somewhere else and I needed it, that you had to pay back or eat the cost of the other half of the deposit to give you that tube?
Yeah, there are kind of different with the contract. Usually we even have kind of 2 hours or 4 hours or 12 hours.
Depending on location.
Depending on the location. If you get that, depending on the public, or it's or whatever. This happens. Usually it's not that we don't have it in-house, maybe it's just not access.
All before you do it.
Right. I actually had them.
It's not often.
No. I actually, the one time I had an issue with Siemens, the one time, they actually flew it in from Germany. They put it on a plane. It was in the U.S. the next day, and I had it couriered. So I missed it. They missed their mark by about 8 hours. So we talked about it. They just gave us a discount because we did the company I was with did a lot of work with Siemens, but they were on it. Global Evil, not so much. So that's just been my experience. All right. So let's talk about cost of ownership. This is a big thing when you go to purchase that new equipment, right? You want to know what it actually costs you to have this equipment. Okay, so we know we have to keep track of the cost of manpower. This is one that's a lot of times lost when you go to a capital planning meeting because your clinical engineering guy wasn't invited, right? The service for that model or modality, whether it was a manufacturer, whether it was an independent service organization, or whether it was your guys in-house, whether you know it or not, just like you know how much you average per tech, if you have techs operating, Same with us. We have an average hourly rate that we calculate against our manpower, right? And that includes all of our benefits, travels, everything is rolled up into that. Cost of outside service labor, we just talked about that, and then just add it all together. Then we talk about the cost of downtime, which it's instrumental that clinical engineering talks to the people who actually have the downtime. How much does your downtime cost you? How many patients are we being diverted? Are we missing? Are affected? Right? Because all of that was a great professional goal. That brings in, because I never thought of that, the whole, how many patients were affected? Not just the monetary amount, but how many patients were affected by this. Why? Because, and you know what? My mom might have been one of those patients. And that's what I look at every time. I tell my guys every time, if I go down and equipment's not working, I'm gonna make them hook it up to you, because anybody that comes in here has someone who loves them and cares about them and wants the best service, right? That's why we're all here. And I take that very, very seriously. So, like I said, mean time to failure times your average downtime times your revenue. That's what we're gonna calculate it. The cost of all the parts for that unit, right? Real easy for that model. Again, you can scale this to your size. So if you have a bunch of different types of CT, you can just say, what's our CT department? You can say, what's our Siemens versus GE versus Philips versus Toshiba. And Toshiba will always be the highest cost, by the way. And then we're going to put it all together. All right? And that's what this looks like. It looks really complex and confusing. Well, let me walk through it. It's real simple. We've got all our manpower, downtime of parts. It's divided by the unit, right? Unit years. Then we have the yearly depreciation of all units, which that's just a fancy way of saying if our unit costs $1 million, we're gonna take credit for it, 1/10 of $1 million for 10 years, right? And if you want to go through that in more detail, I will be happy to do that offline, because it's just a big, ugly accounting way to trick people into buying stuff. What that comes down to is your average cost per year of ownership per unit, right? Because let's face it, we've all had the one CT that sits in the corner that's broken all the time, and it's the one that sits next to it that's the same model that's never broken, and we have to look what the average cost of value is across those two, right? We want to know what the average cost is. When I can take that to you and I say, my average cost of the GE is this, my average cost of the Siemens is this, my average cost of the Toshiba is this, that gives people more information to purchase. If we take in combination with that, how many patients were affected by the downtime? We go, hey, our GEs, Global Eagles, have, they've affected 100 patients. The Siemens only affected 10 patients. Toshiba's, there's 1 million patients. So which one do you really want to start looking at more seriously as far as cost of ownership, both in, human sense? And I'll just let you know, you guys will all have access to this. So if you need it later, you can get the PowerPoint. You can look at all these. And make sure if you need it, you get my email. And I'll tell you what it is, because it's not the same as what it was in the thing originally. I'll tell you that at the end. So that if you need and you want to talk to me about this, I'm happy to talk to you about this further. All right? I believe that none of us are really competitors when we walk in this room. We're all trying to be better. Right? So I will talk to you gladly. I will give you all my information. Okay, so then there's the average cost of ownership to date, which is a little bit different, because what we're doing is we're just adding up all the costs. So we have all our manpower, downtime, and parts, and that's divided by the cost of the units by the number of the units. So we get the 1 unit, right? So we've got the cost of all the units, say 10 CTs, because they've got different options, they're going to have different costs. We divide that by the number of CTs we have. That gives us an average CT cost, right? Then we take the manpower, downtime, parts, and we're going to look at, and that shouldn't be division, that should be addition. That's another error I just caught. That's going to give us our average unit cost of ownership to date, right?
So you're putting service contracts in your cost of manpower, or?
Okay, so if you need to, if you're talking contracts, yeah, absolutely. Okay. You put that, I follow that under the same as I would do a service event from a vendor. Right, I just put that cost in. Typically, ideally for me though, I won't have any contracts. I'll be doing time and material, or have be paying people on time and material to come in. But if you guys can't do it, ideal. This is ideal. But you're right. Cost of contract will be rolled up with this. We have cost of contracts on it. Yeah.
So you're saying cost of contracts to the cost of parts and labor?
Yep. Cost of parts and labor would also, the contract would cover your parts and your labor. Depending, and you gotta watch what kind of contract you have, because there's 8 million kinds of contracts. So it may be a labor-only contract, it may be a parts-only contract. You gotta make sure that you cover all your bases, right? Now, your clinical engineer guy, if you can't do that, he's not worth it, get rid of him, get a new one. Right? You can tell him I said that. If I meet him on the street, I can take a punch, it's all right. All right, so practical uses of this data. Let's talk about that real quick. Okay, so you can assist with your capital purchase decisions. I already kind of mentioned that, right? We can break it up by manufacturer, modality, whatever you want to break it out. It's just a matter of putting in the right numbers, the right models, right? And my Siemens friend is going to hate me for this, but it can help you avoid your point of sale, POS, you can use whatever you want for POS, but point of sale contracts. Because the truth is, in my experience, the first 5 years after warranty is the best time to go time and material if you're going to do it. All right, even if you have no in-house people, the first 5 years is when you're going to have the least downtime. And so, just probably it makes sense, someone who's selling you a piece of equipment, they would love for you to have a full-time service contract for that first 5 years. That's going to be the highest margin. It makes sense? And the truth is, if you're in specific situations, especially if you're rural, it actually might be worth having a contract. But you can discuss it with this information and say, is it really worth us having this contract? Right? Because maybe you do need that 98% uptime guarantee. If that's what you need, it makes sense. But in Houston, I don't need that. Right? I can throw a rock and hit field service engineers. Okay, it'll help you negotiate contracts. If you sit down with say the vendor, you buy it from the manufacturer, you say, listen, here's our data, here's what we have. Maybe we do need a point of sale agreement. Well, let's talk about the realities of what it really is going to cost, because we know we've got the data. Right, so and if you want to modify this data, which I didn't show you up here, but let's say you want to know what your first 5 years cost. You just pull your first 5 years of data and run everything as 5 years. Right? That's the modification. Right, exactly. And so you can say, hey, in the first 5 years, we only have this much cost of ownership. You've got a great product. Why would I need to have a point of sale for this price? I'd love to have a contract, but maybe we can negotiate the price down. Right? And if you won't do it, I'll go find a third party. Right? So you can also say, is this contract saving you money? Would that contract save me money? Because believe me, there have been times where contracts have saved me money and I just bought a contract. Why? Because I have a cap that way on my parts. If I've got something that's eating x-ray tubes and they say, hey, we include glassware, and I've had it, eating tubes for the last 2 years, I put it on a contract, let them take the risk. Because I lost that bet. Because that's really, we're in Vegas. That's really what we're doing is we're saying, what's our best bet? Right. What is our best bet? Right? Mean time to failure for a specific location may also allow you negotiation of low use rates. Most manufacturers have some low use prices, so do your independent service organizations. If you have something you're using, you have to have, but you're only using it, a third of the time, that can change their risk. And if it changes their risk, then your contract price should come down. Right.
5 patients a day, maybe.
Low use, right? It's not like the ER one, which is cranking through 100, right? This can also be helped to calculate staff, or at least clinical engineering, right? If we see enough downtime and we see our cost of ownership is getting high, we may need more clinical engineering guys. Or maybe we need less because they're not doing a good job. We need to hire different ones, or we need to go on contract for that particular unit.
Don, do you have a dollar amount when it comes to that? I mean,
okay, this is going to vary by market, right? So in the market I came from, I can tell you, if I've got something that's running over about $65,000 year after year per unit, and I've got more than 2 units, I need to start considering if I have enough manpower. Why? Because I can get a field service, now depending on the level of the modality. If it's a CT, it might have to be more like 150. But if it's general x-ray, 65,000, if I got 2 or 3 units, I need to see if I've got enough guys, right? Because I can get an engineer for 50 in Ohio, Dayton. start low, entry level 50, they can just do general x-ray work. And I know, so, but you have to know your market as to what your manpower costs are, right? Because in Houston, it's a whole different ballgame. I'd be afraid of the engineer to get to come to work for me for $50,000.
Not even fresh out of school.
Not even fresh out of school. In Houston, I had culture shock when I went to Houston. I had to explain to the lady that it was morally against my moral values to pay $1,500 a month for 485 square foot apartment. I just couldn't do it. I'm from Ohio. Right? I had a 2,000 square foot house and third of an acre for like $800 a month. So I had more.
San Francisco.
Actually,
In Seattle, because of that.
yeah, no, I actually had several people when I was turning wrenches try to get me to come to California, and they were offering me what looked like a lot of money until I saw the cost of property in California. I was like, no, you can't afford me in California. All right, see, do I have anything else? No, I think that's it. So we have questions or we want to discuss this any further? I don't even know where we're at of time. What time is it? Oh, yeah, okay, so.
You bring up misuse.
Right.
One of the things we did that I don't know which person on our team thought of it, like me, said instead of using misuse or neglect or whatever, we actually changed that field or that pull down on that field to use error. That way it doesn't say you're an idiot. It says somebody,
Yeah, somebody abused
I
it.
ain't pointing any fingers, but somebody.
And that's actually a good idea because let's face it, nobody wants to be told. Right.
Passive play.
Nobody wants to be told that you don't know what you're doing.
Right. And it actually changed the dynamic between us.
Right. And that's,
We were screwed up.
and actually that's a conversation we're having nationally in CHI because of that exact reason. It's like, do we really want to call it, because it's actually labeled as misuse abuse for us.
Right. That's what it used to be for us.
And so we changed that because even if it is, let's just change it to use error.
Yeah. It's been done.
Right.
It's been done.
Because let's face it, most misuse errors are not because the person using it wants to break the equipment. It's because either they weren't shown properly how to use it or because they get in a hurry because they're focused on the patient. And it's like I tell my guys over and over, when you go down to deal with a tech or a nurse or anything like that, you have to realize they may just have the worst day of their life. They may just watch somebody die. They may see somebody who's in a lot of pain, family suffering. They just have to take all of that on and be professional. And now they got to deal with you. And if you're going in there being an arrogant jerk, of course they're going to blast you. Right, exactly, absolutely. And so you have to go in and go be sensitive to that and go, hey, I'm on your team. Let's roll in the same direction. How can I help you get this fixed? How can we make this work? Because I know you've got patients and I want those patients to get seen. That's as much part of being a clinical engineer as anything. If you want to be good at it. Any other questions or things we want to talk about? Yes, sir.
A couple years ago, the hospital got rid of our service. It's a radiology guy. He was almost fixing everything. We went to like a company that no,
Right.
in-house and everybody. Something goes down. All I can do is pick up the phone and call the vendor. Me and I'm trying to fix it myself.
Right.
And it's like, is that a model that's?
Here's my theory, and this is what I've told the hospitals that wanted us to do that, where I've been in the past. Because again, I'm a guy who's turned wrenches for 20 years, fixing equipment. I've been a manufacturer's rep for Shimatsu. I've been independent service organization everywhere else, right? On Whole Logic too, I think we were reps for Whole Logic. Bottom line is this: if you're going to have somebody pick up the phone and call service in every time something breaks, I can pay somebody minimum wage to do that. Your job is when something breaks is to call this manufacturer or to call this service organization. I don't need to pay somebody who's been trained and gone to school. And I can hire somebody fresh out of high school. I can hire, I can hire someone whose kid, an empty nester who just wants something to do. Pay them a little bit more than minimum wage. I don't have to pay professional prices to have somebody pick up the phone and be a dispatcher. Right. And that's insane. There's no reason. I mean, on that particular one, if you want to talk to me after that, I can show you how to run those numbers. Because it won't take much.
So you want to get your doctorate in psychology, not in big data? Seriously.
Well, psychology is big data. Psychology is all statistics. It's all statistics. But like you're saying, if you can use that same data that you have, because you have to have it recorded that service has been called in. So you take your cost of the service you're paying for, all that service you paid for, and then add on top of it the cost of whatever the contract is for a dispatcher, right? And then go out and find out what you could hire a dispatcher for, and say we'd be better off hiring Bob down the street.
Yeah, but what's missing in that equation is you're paying 50, I don't know what your scope of $50,000 you're talking about. But you're putting the risk on their Novo. You gotta remember that too. That's their function, they're an actuary. They're taking that risk, and you've paid for them to take that risk. And a lot of people say, and I used to live in that world, and the people from Renova are actually my ex-business partners, so I've heard this a lot. And
But are they taking what are the
sure,
money?
they're taking the risk.
No, I'm not asking a question. What I'm saying is, they're paying for the service to be done?
Sure.
Okay, that's what I'm asking. Because if they're paying for the service to be done,
Yeah, they
for
are.
whatever that contract price is.
So they're running their companies.
Yeah,
Utility and insurance.
they are.
Right, if that's the case, if you're not paying more money for the service, the question then you have is what's your downtime like? And that's,
And I just have a guy who is like, you are, that go and fix everything. And even the things they couldn't fix, by the time the service engineer got there, he had to solve and figure it out while he was helping them. And so we go from like maybe a day to now.
I hear you, and I'm in-house now, so I understand the difference. But I'm just telling you, I used to, and I was a service guy just like you before, I used to hear, man, you guys are so cheap. And I go, oh, we're not cheap, your administration's cheap.
right.
That's the reality.
But the way you calculate that is your downtime.
Yeah,
The downtime calculations, you go to whoever, so let's say your CT goes down, you have to go in and track that downtime. You go talk to your director and you say, what's it cost an hour when this is down? Right? So you take those numbers, you take them to administration, and say this is what it's costing us versus what we have. And you have to calculate those numbers to be happy.
actually, Renova can give you the downtime numbers.
Yep, there you
Don't tell them what you're asking.
go. Exactly.
They have weapons.
Yep, and then if nothing else, you can go back and negotiate again against your contract that you already have. At least get your downtime reduced. Right? Anything else anybody wants to talk about?
You mentioned like, share your email.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's right. My email is John Garrett, John. And if you don't get it here, I'll be up here for a few minutes where you get it afterwards, but it's John. John Garrett. John Garrett. And that's at catholichealth.net. Yeah.
First, I like to speak up for the imaging director. I speak up for our engineers who are awesome. They often, it's not, they're actually our employees. The administration is our contract parties.
Right.
We have a decent relationship with them, but the engineers get stuck between us and the contract.
Yep.
And often, the thought is, and I'll say it these times to the engineers, is that they don't have to fix things. When it was, they were never trained at the time. You know, trained on that. So we are, it's usually really important. They've got to be trained.
Right.
So we stick up to them. And my other thought is, so we are going to be colleagues in the future. Amy and I work with you to help.
Okay, yeah, absolutely.
So are you, so you're a CHI employee?
Yep.
Is all bio
Everything is in, yeah, it's all CHI is internal.
So have you heard the rumors, are we going to go back to your office?
That's what our guys are telling us.
That's what.
That's what we're being told, is that because it makes no sense, because one of the core requirements of being a CHI hospital is using the CHI in-house clinical engineering program.
So it'd be cheaper for you to live in
Or Las Vegas.
Okay, all right.
Well, especially once we get the merger done, which if everybody else doesn't know, Dignity and CHI are merging, and it will be the second largest healthcare system in the United States. So, well, right now, I would love to solve problems. That's what I love to do. I do it all day. And I tell my guys in my shop, there are no problems. We solve problems. We might have challenges, and we have a lot of opportunities, not problems. I was in the Navy, I got shot at. Nobody's shooting at me, I'm not out at sea, I don't have any problems. Right?
No, I said that we compare some. Back to the engineers office. They need to go on clear in our part of our.
Right.
And my CT checks, they call engineers directly. We have a great relationship. Which basically they get to make it up. But it's been a great relationship.
And it can be that, and when you work together, when you actually work together, it really, and that's one of the reasons I love these ICE events, is because we don't just have techie guys, right? We've got directors, we've got techs, we've got biomed, clinical engineering, we've got vendors, we've got third party, we've got Siemens here. This is great because we can all sit in a room and go, where's our pain? How can we help each other? What are we maybe as consumers not doing, or what can we do as a consumer to make my price come down, or make it so I can get my parts sooner? And what can how can we make this all better? Because again, I keep going back to the idea that anybody I care about could end up in any hospital in the nation, my hospitals or someone else's. And I want every hospital to have the best care we can get, right, for those people. And so the only way we do that is we got to keep costs down, but we also have to make sure we have quality and that we have availability, right? And that's what all this comes back down to. All this data are just numbers and showing how much availability we have and how much it costs us to be available. And we can twist and turn these numbers. And if you have a specific project and you say, John, I'm not quite sure how I want to crank the numbers to really get the real data from this, I'm happy. It may not be right away because I'm writing that budget after 4 weeks, but I would be happy to help you walk through what you need, what numbers you do. Right? It's just basic algebra. What it comes down is algebraic. Right? You can even plot it on courses, do some geometry, all that math stuff that they maybe learn in high school and college. So that's all I've got. If nobody has anything else, I'm going to say, hey, it's been a party. And I appreciate your time. And if you have any questions you want to talk to me, I'm available, whether it's here, whether it's later during the weekend. All right?